Welcome back to the KTP podcast, the show where we explore careers, insights, and everything in between. Each episode, we tackle a new topic to help you grow, learn, and stay ahead of your professional journey. Let's jump right into it.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining on to the KTTP podcast again. On today's episode, we have Adrian Haight, who is currently a leader at product in Scotiabank. And I'll pass it off to Adrian to talk a little bit more about himself. But I basically worked with him before, and he's a super talented and super organized person. And it's great to have you on the podcast, Adrian.
Super, Tej. Thank you. I'm Adrian Haight. I'm responsible for design and digital product at Scotiabank, particularly around client journeys relating to trading, investing, and advice. So that's a mouthful, but the bank has four business lines. One of them is the Canadian bank. Another one is wealth management, and trading, investing, and advice kind of goes across those two businesses. Prior to this, I've done a bunch of roles at the bank. I've worked in fraud and authentication in digital product, and then also in more broadly technology projects and programs. I worked in Colombia, just in the retail branches, learning about the space there and working on sales programs. Spent some time in Mexico doing a project with a fintech called Cabbage, which does small business loans through a cool credit adjudication thing. So we can go down that rabbit hole if helpful. But had a bunch of different experiences at the bank, and prior to that, I really did startups and entrepreneurial stuff, as well as, of course, my undergrad in history at Dalhousie and graduate school in England.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Adrian. Talking about your educational background, we saw that you kind of came from like an untraditional major, I guess you could say, trying to get into the tech industry. Why did you pursue a career in product? How did you get into it? If you could elaborate on your career path so far.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, to be frank, I mean, I didn't really choose product. Let's say it chose me. That sounds kind of dramatic, but I think, it speaks to a career path that's been largely fueled by serendipity. Like I started in history, it was something I was passionate about. It's hard to get work coming out of that. Took a course in my undergrad around entrepreneurship, which really excited me. And so I started a business soon after that, and I started a few which really changed sort of the path I was going down. And I ended up going to graduate school and doing a couple different things, social anthropology, which of course is way off the map, and also ended up doing business again through serendipity. An individual who I was close with kind of, let's say, convinced me or talked me through sort of life decisions, and I decided to go and do business. And then from there I got into the corporate world, and I think the most relevant anecdote is I joined a rotational program, which is full of MBAs, and it's wasn't really my personality type. And I think a lot of those folks were really planning their careers while I really wasn't. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And serendipity led me to different people that had an impact on my career and led me into some of the things I mentioned that I've done at Scotiabank. So I think a lot of those things sort of lead you to product in a way. Entrepreneurship is kind of in its own way a product role. You're responsible for the product, quite literally. You're responsible for a P&L, the profit and loss. You're responsible for bringing people together, towards a common goal. So I think that's all, those are all product skills that you're either developing or you have. And then at the bank, product made a lot of sense for me because of the culture in the digital organization and the opportunity to travel and do different things. So different things have brought me to product. I think some sort of inherent skills, some of the output that digital had to offer, digital product. But yeah, that's kind of the path and how I got into it.
And that's awesome, Adrian. Thanks for sharing that. I'm also curious, just with working with you as well previously, one of the most important skill I learned in product is that you need to have a lot of patience, right? You're dealing with a lot of different stakeholders, you're dealing with a lot
Yeah.
of meetings, a lot of different moving parts, right? So I'm curious to know, right? Like, what are the top skills that you've learned in your career in product, and what do you think you can still maybe improve on, looking forward?
Well, Lord knows there's a lot for me to improve on, but yeah, I would say from a product perspective, there's some key skills that I've either, again, I think it's a mix, right? Some people are more inherently, have more inherent skills around different things that are product, that are beneficial to a successful product manager. And some folks can develop those skills, but I would say a few of them are things like communication is a big one. The ability to communicate with others. There's a lot in there. Communication is quite broad, but the ability to articulate your ideas and bring people along with you. You know what I mean? And that's not, it could be sales, it could be marketing. It's really just the ability to sort of understand where other people are coming from and put your words into a way that they can understand. And I think communication is really important for a product manager. There's some basic stuff like drive. Some of the most successful folks on our team are just driven. They work their butts off, and you can always rely on them. And part of product is kind of, there's an angle to it where there's fires, software goes down or there's issues or what have you. And I think it's really important both for the team and for leadership to have people in product who they can rely on and who can step up. So, that drive is really important. And then maybe the last is some technical competence. Like Tej, when we brought you in at Scotia, one of the big things that appealed to you beyond sort of your very sort of natural charisma and all that stuff was that you had a background in engineering. And we find that product people can be very successful if they can communicate with engineers in language they understand and understand sort of what's being built. It just makes for better story development, better requirements, and better outcomes, better discussions with designers. So I think the technical piece is important. Are all those things like mandatory? No. And I don't think there's like a standard profile for a product person, but I think those are really important. Maybe the last thing I'll mention is there's usually a business product behind the technical product, like unless you're selling software. And even if you are selling software, but traditional products, businesses, I should say, like banks, telcos, what have you, there's all sorts of products and services out there. They often are building technology as well, right? So the bank's an easy example because I work at Scotia. So the bank is not a technology business. The bank is a financial services business. However, the bank needs technology, right? Duh. And so they hire in, usually at least at Scotia, we hire in people to do digital product design, engineering, analytics. And when we hire folks for the team, beyond those three other categories I mentioned, having folks who understand the business is really important. Trading, we do the direct investing mobile and web applications for Scotia, iTrade. And when we hire a digital product person on the team for those Scrum teams, you're really looking for somebody who knows trading. Now, you don't have to be an expert in trading, but somebody who can't talk about limit orders and shorts and longs and what have you, but just be able to speak about it and understand that, sort of be a customer to some extent, is really important. So those are some of the skills I've felt are important. Or if I'm looking to get into a new space, or I get a new portfolio brought in, the first thing I do is try to understand the business product. Like, why do we have this product? How does it drive the business? How do users engage with it?
Yeah, absolutely. The business case is equally as important as how it's being made. Moving on, how do you see the product world evolving in the next couple of years, with the introduction of AI and ChatGPT? Like, is it being adopted at the bank? How's it being integrated into your workflows? What does the future hold for you?
Yeah, I think the future is difficult to predict on any good day, but I would say there's probably an asterisk around where you work. If you work in a corporate non-tech organization like a bank, digital product in 5 years may look very similar to what digital product looks like today. Slow to innovate, heavily regulated. So, adoption of AI tools may, I would guess, be slow and probably focus on internal processes before you start putting code that's going into production into the hands of an LLM. But if you work in corporate tech, someone like Amazon or Google, I would think there's probably significant changes that will come there. I mean, giving requirements to a large language model instead of giving requirements to an individual, there's probably some of those communication skills will be really important. I think in our world, there'll be less impact of, there's a lot of hype around AI, which is a very broad term. There's a lot of different things that could be considered artificial intelligence. But when it comes to large language models, I think there's probably little impact at the bank. But at some of those tech companies, the requirements you're putting in are going to matter. The role of product is really to create the best test set. And whether you're using AI tools or you're not, I think that will continue to be the case, that sort of the output that's expected of a good product manager.
I think that's definitely on point, right? And just extending that question a bit, what do you think, Adrian, is the biggest misconception a person outside the product space can have about a PM?
Oh, good question. I mean, I don't see a lot of misconceptions around product. That I guess, maybe something around that there's a typical successful digital product person. I think you get people with a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different skill sets having successful careers in product. So that might be a misconception to consider. And I think that other piece about knowing the business is maybe it's a conception that people perhaps are misconceived about, which is, if I know agile and I know technology and I've worked in digital product before, I'm a good candidate for a business that I don't understand very well. And I shouldn't say you're not a good candidate, because I think you are as good a candidate as whoever is in the position of the hiring manager. And a lot of folks are hired without the business background. But I think that piece is important for people to think about, lining up an understanding of the business with some of the other skills for product managers when they're going forward.
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your role as a director of product, and what are some ways you tackled them?
I think the biggest challenge that seems to come up throughout both digital product work and UX design work and life more generally is relationship based. The biggest challenges are, I find, there's complex solutions that have to be built, and those are of course very challenging and can take a lot of time and effort to understand and master. But the relationship part is, I think, always the most challenging. So, if I think, for me personally as an individual, not that this is totally relevant, but I find that's the most stressful. When I have a conflictuous relationship with somebody in the office, I find that weighs on me, and I sort of ruminate and think through it a lot. But I think those are the biggest challenges for people, because obviously there's a lot of non-quantifiable factors that you need to consider when you're working with others, but also it's the most important piece to making, to moving forward with at least the software that we're developing. You have a large organization, you have obviously all the teams that work in the technology development, but then you also have business teams, you also have other support functions like call centers, branch networks. In big complex organizations, the relationship piece is so important. It's more important than knowing technology. It's more important than knowing the business. It's really critical. So it's the biggest challenge, and it's also the most rewarding piece, I find, working in the space.
No, absolutely. But also backtracking a little bit, right? You mentioned that you necessarily didn't pick product, but product kind of picked you as a role. So I just want to know, if you had to go through your professional journey from scratch, would you still maybe end up in product?
That's a cool question. Well, I think if I started from scratch again, knowing everything I know, I would have been a more dedicated hockey player as a child, and I would have become a professional hockey player. No, I'm kidding. I'm not good enough. But I think it probably would. I think it probably would. It's a space I enjoy working in. It's very topical and relevant, which is interesting and enjoyable. It's technical and complex, which I enjoy. You're learning a lot, even if you know certain aspects of the software really well. Integrating with us with single sign-on isn't, you might be a new challenge from authentication and security perspective that you learn about, and there's examples of that throughout the work. So I'm not a big believer in fate, but I think probably genetics predetermines some of that stuff. Anyway, let's not go too existential, but yeah, I think I'd probably end up in the same place just based on my personality, my interests. And
Going back to a time when you were still discovering those interests, like what were some things you did to have fun back in university?
oh Lord, you guys don't want to know. No, I played a lot of sports. I played soccer with the university, and played a lot of hockey. Did a lot of social stuff, I guess, as I'm sure you guys know well, just having graduated. Yeah, and then I was really interested in some of the academic stuff that happened outside of the classroom. There was, we'd have speakers come to the university. This is undergrad, right? We had people like Howard Zinn, I remember, came and really enjoyed reading, discussing, and of course watching Howard when he came to speak. So yeah, did a mix of things. I went to grad school about how many years later? Like 5, 6, 7 years later. And you're a little bit more mature. Maybe you guys will have the opportunity to do that when you get older. It's an awesome experience because when I was 17, 18, 19 in classes, you have a certain mental, emotional development, and that's great, and you learn a ton and you have fun doing it. When you're 26, 27, you come in with a different perspective as well. So I found that really valuable. And but I did a lot of the same sort of activities at school, social stuff, sports, and extracurricular academic stuff. So no juicy stories for you guys, but yeah, that's kind of my free time at school.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm just gonna ask you one last question and we're gonna wrap this up. But at the start of your professional career, what do you think was the most valuable piece of advice you received at that point?
I got a lot of advice when I was younger and I started my career, but I'm not sure that I listened to, or I could even process it. Without the experience, the way my brain works is experience is a really big part of my learning. Sitting down with a textbook or getting life lessons on the couch from a family member is good, and of course, valuable in its own way. Just the way my brain learns, though, it hasn't been the process through which I've learned. But what I would say if I was giving advice to somebody, and I think I kind of looked into this, but planning versus personal development, let's say, is an interesting juxtaposition that you should consider. So what I mean is, if you're looking at your career and you say, okay, I really like digital product, I really want to work in the space, how do I get there? I'm going to do A, B, C. I'm going to work at do this at a startup. I'm going to do an internship over here at Scotia. That's really good, and I'd really encourage that. I think at the same time, while you're at work or while you're thinking about what you want to do for work, while you're planning, the focus, you should really make time to be yourself and to build relationships with people, because that, I find, is the piece that connects all of the opportunities that people get. I mean, not in every case, right? But I think it's really important. A lot of folks sort of, life passes them by as they plan. And if you're going to be the most successful you can be in different roles, being yourself, making time to build relationships, and trying to nurture them, not just having coffee dates with people, but being genuine and building relationships with folks and nurturing them, I think is super valuable, because that will come back, whether it's directly or indirectly, that'll come back and serve you really well. For me, just a quick anecdote. I mentioned, I joined the bank in sort of like a rotational program, and a lot of the folks were pretty A type, and were sort of plotting their careers, and I was kind of different and didn't have a plan, which may not have been the best thing. But I met a guy who was a VP in a certain area, and he loved hockey, and he loved talking about his kids' hockey. And I went to a charity event and played with him, so he got to know me a little bit. And when I was getting to the end of my rotational program, he came by my desk and he said, "Adrian, what are you doing after your rotational program?" I said, "I still don't know." He said, "Do you want to interview with Mackenzie and come and work in our in the Mexico office?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested. Come with me." So he marches me down to the plaza, and there's the partner from McKinsey sitting there, and he's like, "This guy I think would be good for this role." And I spent the afternoon with the McKinsey guy and interviewed, and I think it was the next day or the day after, he came by my desk again, and he said, "You're moving to Mexico on the weekend." And yeah, so
That's awesome.
I never would have had that opportunity if I'd overplanned and jumped into something too early. And of course, having somebody who gets to know you, or in this case me, and vouches for you and kind of supports you, not out of any tacit agreement that you've made with them or transactional thing, but just out of sort of, that relationship. So that served me well, and hopefully it serves others well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great piece of advice. I know that nurturing relationships has come a long way for both of us as well. And we're very
Yeah.
grateful for those people and those relationships that we've made.
Amazing.
But yeah, that's all of our questions. Again, thank you so much, Adrian, for taking the time to join us on this episode. Really hope
Super, guys. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to our episode, and we'll catch you at the next one.